Hello friends, and welcome back to the channel where we dive deep into the mysteries of our planet's incredible past. I'm absolutely thrilled you're here tonight, settling in for what might just be the most mind-bending journey through time we've ever taken together. Tonight, we're not just stepping back a few thousand years or even a few million. We're traveling back 201 million years to enter a world so alien, so magnificent, and so utterly different from our own that it feels like visiting another planet entirely. This is the Jurassic Period. And if you think you know this world because you've seen the movies, think again. Because the real Jurassic was far stranger, far more beautiful, and in many ways far more terrifying than Hollywood ever dared to imagine. Picture this for a moment. A world where the continents themselves were in completely different positions, where massive inland seas stretched across what we now call Europe and North America, where the very air you breathed was richer in oxygen, making everything from insects to dinosaurs grow to sizes that would dwarf their modern relatives. A world where flowers didn't exist yet, where grass earth during the Jurassic evolving, and where the can barely imagined today. This was forests were painted in shades of green we were still millions of years away from roughly 201 to 145 million years ago. And it wasn't just different, it was revolutionary. This was the period when dinosaurs truly came into their own, when they stopped being the scrappy survivors of earlier extinctions and became the undisputed rulers of the planet. It was when evolution seemed to throw caution to the wind and experiment with the most incredible forms of life our planet has ever seen. But here's what's really going to blow your mind. Everything you think you know about this period, every image that pops into your head when you hear the word Jurassic, is probably wrong. The real world of 150 million years ago was so much more complex, so much more nuanced, and so much more extraordinary than any movie could capture. And that's exactly what we're going to explore together. Over the next several episodes, we're going to reconstruct this lost world piece by piece. We're going to walk through forests that existed when your ancestors were tiny mammals hiding in the shadows. We're going to swim in oceans filled with marine reptiles that make modern sharks look like goldfish. We're going to soar through skies dominated by creatures that weren't quite birds, but weren't quite dinosaurs either. Most importantly, we're going to discover how scientists have managed to piece together this incredible puzzle using nothing but fragments of bone, impressions in rock, and the most sophisticated detective work you've ever seen. Because the story of how we know what we know about the Jurassic is almost as fascinating as the period itself. So grab something warm to drink, get comfortable, and let's begin our journey into the Jurassic Period. Trust me when I say that by the time we're finished, you'll never look at our modern world the same way again. When most people hear the word Jurassic, their minds immediately jump to towering Tyrannosaurus rex, razor-sharp velociraptors, and massive brachiosaurus stretching their necks toward the sky. But here's the thing that might surprise you. Two of those three dinosaurs weren't even from the Jurassic Period. They came later during the Cretaceous. It's like thinking the Beatles were from the 1980s when they were actually a 1960s phenomenon. This confusion isn't entirely our fault. Hollywood has taken some serious liberties with prehistoric timelines, mixing and matching dinosaurs from different periods like ingredients in some kind of paleontological soup. But the real Jurassic had its own cast of characters, and they were every bit as spectacular as anything that came after. The Jurassic Period gets its name from the Jura Mountains, which stretch along the border between France and Switzerland. It was here that geologists first identified the distinctive rock layers that would give this slice of deep time its name. But the Jurassic world extended far beyond these European mountains. In fact, during this period, Europe as we know it today was largely underwater, existing as a scattered archipelago of islands in warm, shallow seas. This brings us to one of the most important things to understand about the Jurassic. The world looked completely different, not just in terms of what was living on it, but in terms of the actual shape and position of the continents themselves. The supercontinent Pangaea, which had dominated the earlier Triassic period, was beginning to break apart. Like a massive jigsaw puzzle being slowly pulled apart, the continents were drifting toward the positions they occupy today, though they still had millions of years of travel ahead of them. North America and Europe were separating, creating the early Atlantic Ocean. Africa was rotating counterclockwise, opening up the Tethys Sea, a massive tropical ocean that stretched from what we now call the Mediterranean, all the way to Southeast Asia. South America and Africa were still joined at the hip, as were Antarctica and Australia. India was an island continent drifting northward on a collision course with Asia, though that dramatic meeting was still far in the future. This continental breakup had profound effects on global climate. As the landmasses separated, ocean currents began to flow in new patterns. Warm tropical waters could circulate more freely around the globe, creating what scientists call a greenhouse climate. There were no ice caps at either pole. Lush forests extended almost to the Arctic Circle, and the global average temperature was somewhere between 5 and 10 degrees Celsius, warmer than it is today. But temperature wasn't the only atmospheric difference. The air itself was richer in oxygen, containing roughly 23% oxygen compared to the 21% we breathe today. That might not sound like much, but it made a significant difference. This oxygen-rich atmosphere helped fuel the evolution of gigantic organisms. It's one of the reasons why enormous sizes and why even the insects Jurassic dinosaurs could grow to such much larger than their modern counterparts. The landscape and other invertebrates of the time were often of the Jurassic was unlike anything we see today. Imagine vast coniferous forests stretching to the horizon, but these weren't the pine and fir trees you might recognize. These were massive Araucaria trees, relatives of the modern monkey puzzle tree, some reaching heights of over 60 meters. Towering tree ferns created dense undergrowth, their fronds casting intricate shadows on the forest floor. Cycads, those palm-like plants with tough, leathery leaves, dotted clearings and the forest edges. What you wouldn't see were flowers. Flowering plants, or angiosperms, wouldn't make their dramatic entrance until the Cretaceous period. The Jurassic world was painted entirely in shades of green, brown, and the occasional splash of colour from fungal growths or primitive cone structures. It was a world that would have felt alien to our eyes, accustomed as we are to the riot of colours that flowers bring to modern landscapes. And then there was the wildlife. It was when dinosaurs truly hit. Oh, the wildlife. The Juras their stride, diversifying into an incredible array of forms. But they weren't alone. The skies were ruled by pterosaurs, flying reptiles that ranged from sparrow-sized creatures to giants with wingspans approaching that of small aircraft. The oceans teemed with marine reptiles, plesiosaurs with necks like living periscopes, and massive predatory pliosaurs that could bite a small car in half. In the undergrowth, small mammals scurried about, most no larger than modern shrews. These were our ancestors, though they wouldn't inherit the Earth for another 100 million years. For now, they lived in the shadows, literally and figuratively, eking out a living in a world dominated by reptiles. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about the Jurassic wasn't any single creature or landscape feature. It was the sheer exuberance of life itself. This was evolution in overdrive, a period when natural selection seemed to be experimenting with every possible body plan, every conceivable lifestyle, every imaginable ecological niche. Scientists have identified more than 300 different species of dinosaurs from the Jurassic period alone, and new ones are being discovered regularly. These weren't just variations on a theme either. They represented fundamentally different approaches to the problem of how to be a large land animal. Some, like the massive sauropods, solved the problem by becoming living mountains, growing so large that few predators would dare attack them. Others, like the stegosaurs, developed elaborate defensive armor and weapons. Still others, like the early theropods, perfected the art of being swift, efficient predators. And here's what's truly amazing. We know all of this from evidence that's been buried in rock for over 140 million years. Every detail I've just shared with you has been painstakingly reconstructed by paleontologists working with fragments of bone, impressions of leaves, microscopic pollen grains, and chemical signatures locked in ancient sediments. It's like trying to reconstruct an entire civilization from a handful of artifacts scattered across different continents. Yet somehow, through careful observation, clever deduction, and increasingly sophisticated technology, scientists have managed to bring this lost world back to life. The story of how we've learned to read these ancient clues is itself a fascinating journey through scientific discovery. It involves everything from Victorian fossil hunters armed with nothing but hammers and brushes, to modern researchers using CAT scanners and supercomputers to peer inside fossilized bones without breaking them. But before we dive into those detective stories, we need to understand what made the Jurassic so special. What were the conditions that allowed this incredible flowering of life? How did the Earth itself set the stage for what many paleontologists consider the golden age of dinosaurs? The answer lies in a perfect storm of geological, climatic, and evolutionary factors that came together during this remarkable period. The breaking apart of Pangaea didn't just rearrange the continents, it fundamentally altered how heat and moisture moved around the planet, creating new opportunities for life to flourish in ways it never had before. Let me paint you a picture of what this perfect storm looked like, because understanding the stage is crucial to appreciating the incredible drama that was about to unfold upon it. Imagine standing on the shore of what we now call Colorado, but instead of the Rocky Mountains rising behind you, you're looking out over a vast inland sea. The Western Interior Seaway stretched from the Arctic Ocean all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico, effectively splitting North America in two. This wasn't just a large lake, mind you. This was a genuine ocean, complete with tides, currents, and marine ecosystems that rivaled anything in the modern world. These inland seas weren't unique to North America. Similar bodies of water covered much of what we now call Europe, turning the entire continent into an archipelago of tropical islands. The Tethys Ocean, that massive equatorial sea I mentioned earlier, was like a superhighway for marine life, allowing species to spread across what would later become multiple continents. But here's where things get really interesting. These warm, shallow seas weren't just passive features of the landscape. They were active drivers of the Jurassic climate system. Water has an incredible capacity to store and redistribute heat, and with so much warm ocean covering the planet, heat was distributed far more evenly than it is today. The result was a world without extremes. No frozen poles, no scorching deserts, just a gentle gradient from warm to very warm as you moved from the equator toward the Arctic. This thermal stability had profound effects on weather patterns. Without the dramatic temperature differences that drive our modern storm systems, the Jurassic world was remarkably calm. There were no hurricanes, no blizzards, no massive continental storm fronts. Instead, gentle rains fell regularly across most of the planet, nourishing the vast forests that carpeted the continents. And what forests they were! The Jurassic landscape was dominated by conifers, but these weren't the familiar pines and spruces of modern mountain forests. These were giants. Sequoia-like trees that could live for thousands of years, growing to heights that would make modern redwoods look modest. Some of these ancient titans left behind fossilized trunks that are still standing today, preserved in places like Petrified Forest National Park in Arizona. But size wasn't the only impressive feature of Jurassic plant life. These ancient ecosystems had developed incredible complexity. The forest floor was a multi-layered world unto itself. Massive tree ferns created a canopy beneath the canopy, their fronds spreading like green umbrellas 20 feet across. Below them, smaller ferns, horsetails, and primitive flowering plants created dense undergrowth that filtered the sunlight into a green twilight. In the spaces between the trees, cycads grew in groves that must have looked like something from an alien planet. These weren't true palms, though they resembled them superficially. They were ancient seed plants that had perfected their design so thoroughly that they've barely changed in the 200 million years since. Some Jurassic cycads grew to the size of oak trees, their crowns of stiff, sword-like leaves creating perfect shelter for the smaller creatures that lived beneath them. The diversity of plant life was staggering. Scientists have identified over 2,000 different species of plants from Jurassic rocks, and that's almost certainly just a fraction of what actually existed. Each ecosystem had its own unique assemblage of species, adapted to local conditions of soil, rainfall, and seasonal patterns. But plants were just the foundation. The real spectacle was what lived among them. And this is where we need to completely recalibrate our understanding of what the Jurassic world was actually like. See, when most people think about dinosaur ecosystems, they imagine something like the African savanna, with large herbivores grazing on open grasslands, while predators stalk them from the edges. But grass didn't exist yet during the Jurassic. The landscapes were entirely forested, creating a three-dimensional world where life existed at every level, from the forest floor to the canopy. This vertical complexity meant that Jurassic ecosystems could support far more species than we might expect. Different dinosaurs specialized for different levels of the forest. Some, like the long-necked sauropods, were perfectly adapted for browsing on the highest branches, their necks allowing them to access food sources that no other animals could reach. Others, like the low-slung stegosaurs, specialized in munching on ferns and cycads closer to the ground. And then there were the predators. The Jurassic produced some of the most sophisticated hunters in Earth's history. These weren't the massive, bone-crushing predators of the later Cretaceous period. Instead, they were elegant, efficient killing machines. Allosaurus, the apex predator of the late Jurassic, was built like a Formula One race car, all speed and precision. Its long, narrow skull was lined with razor-sharp teeth that curved backward, perfect for slicing through flesh, but designed more for precision strikes than brute force. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about Jurassic predators was their diversity. There wasn't just one way to be a carnivorous dinosaur. Some, like Ceratosaurus, were ambush predators with powerful jaws and shorter legs, perfect for bursting out of dense vegetation to surprise their prey. Others, like the smaller Coelophysis, were pack hunters that relied on speed and coordination to bring down animals much larger than themselves. The really fascinating part is that we know about their hunting strategies not just from their bones, but from their behavior preserved in stone. Trackways discovered in places like the Morrison Formation show us predators stalking their prey, groups of animals moving together in coordinated fashion, and even what appear to be feeding sites where multiple individuals came together to share large carcasses. These trace fossils, as paleontologists call them, give us insights into Jurassic life that bones alone never could. We can see where animals walked, how fast they moved, even how they interacted with each other. Some of the most dramatic discoveries have come from sites where predator and prey trackways intersect, creating frozen moments of ancient drama. One particularly incredible site in Texas preserves the trackways of a large theropod dinosaur following a group of sauropods for over a mile. You can literally see the moment when the predator makes its decision to attack, as its footprints suddenly veer toward one of the herbivores. The sauropod's tracks show it breaking into a run, and then the trail ends at the edge of what was once a riverbank. We'll never know how that particular chase ended, but the fact that we can follow it step by step across 150 million years is absolutely mind-blowing. But the Jurassic wasn't just about dinosaurs on land. The oceans of this period were home to some of the most spectacular marine reptiles that ever lived. These weren't dinosaurs, mind you. They were an entirely different group of reptiles that had returned to the sea and evolved into forms that seem almost too fantastic to be real. The plesiosaurs were perhaps the most elegant of these marine giants. Picture a creature with 4 flippers like a sea turtle, but with a neck that could stretch 30 feet or more. Some species had necks with over 70 vertebrae, more than twice as many as a giraffe. They moved through the water like living submarines, using their long necks to dart their heads forward with lightning speed to snatch fish and squid. But if plesiosaurs were elegant, the pliosaurs were terrifying. These were the ocean's ultimate predators, with massive heads that could measure 10 feet long and jaws lined with teeth the size of bananas. The largest pliosaurs, like Leedsichthys, could grow to lengths of over 50 feet, making them larger than most modern whales. They were perfectly designed for one thing: crushing whatever they wanted to eat. The diversity of Jurassic marine life was extraordinary. Ichthyosaurs, reptiles that had evolved to look remarkably like modern dolphins, zipped through the water at incredible speeds. Some species had eyes the size of dinner plates, the largest eyes of any vertebrate animal ever discovered, suggesting they could hunt in the deep, dark waters where no light penetrated. And swimming among all these giants were countless smaller creatures that have left us some of the most beautiful fossils ever discovered. Delicate belemnites, relatives of modern squid, left behind bullet-shaped shells that are so common in some Jurassic rocks that entire cliffs are made of them. Ammonites, those spiral-shelled cephalopods, evolved into hundreds of different species, each with its own unique shell design. The level of preservation in some Jurassic marine deposits is simply extraordinary. Sites like the Solnhofen limestone in Germany have preserved everything from the soft tissues of jellyfish to the individual scales of fish. We can see exactly what these ancient oceans looked like, down to the smallest detail. But perhaps the most remarkable marine discovery from the Jurassic period is something that bridges the gap between ocean and sky. In 1861, workers in a limestone quarry in Bavaria discovered something that would revolutionize our understanding of evolution itself. It was the fossil of a creature that was clearly a reptile, but it had feathers. Perfect, asymmetrical flight feathers, just like those of modern birds. This was Archaeopteryx, and its discovery sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Here was clear evidence of evolution in action, a creature that was transitional between reptiles and birds. But Archaeopteryx wasn't alone. The Jurassic skies were filled with flying reptiles that had taken to the air in ways that seem almost impossible by modern standards. Pterosaurs were the true rulers of the Jurassic skies, and they came in an incredible variety of forms. Some were no larger than sparrows, with delicate wings that they used to dart between the branches of the great conifer forests. Others were giants with wingspans that approached those of small aircraft. These weren't just gliders either. They were sophisticated flyers with complex wing membranes that could be adjusted for different flight conditions. The diversity of pterosaur lifestyles was remarkable. Some were fish eaters with long, narrow beaks, perfect for plucking prey from the surface of the ocean. Others were filter feeders with hundreds of tiny teeth that they used to strain small organisms from the water, much like modern baleen whales. Still others were terrestrial hunters that stalked small prey on the ground. And then there were the pterosaurs that seemed to defy every rule of physics. Quetzalcoatlus, though it wouldn't appear until the Cretaceous, had Jurassic ancestors that were already pushing the boundaries of what seemed possible for a flying animal. These creatures had hollow bones so thin they were almost transparent, yet strong enough to support wingspans that stretched 40 feet from tip to tip. Their wing membranes were marvels of biological engineering, made of multiple layers of muscle and connective tissue that could be fine-tuned for everything from soaring on thermals to diving at high speed. But here's what really blows my mind about Jurassic pterosaurs. They weren't just flying around randomly. Recent discoveries have shown us that they were incredibly sophisticated in their behavior. Fossil trackways from pterosaur landing sites show us that they walked on all fours when on the ground, using their wing fingers as front limbs. But more than that, we can see evidence of social behavior. Some sites preserve dozens of pterosaur tracks all heading in the same direction, suggesting these animals migrated in flocks across vast distances. The really remarkable thing is that we can trace the evolution of flight happening in real time during the Jurassic. The earliest pterosaurs were relatively small, primitive creatures with long tails and basic wing structures. But by the end of the period, they had evolved into some of the most sophisticated flying machines nature has ever produced. Their brains had enlarged dramatically, developing the complex neural pathways needed for three-dimensional navigation. Their inner ears had evolved specialized structures for maintaining balance during flight. Even their feathers had become incredibly complex, with different types for different functions. Wait, did I say feathers? Yes, because one of the most shocking discoveries of recent decades is that feathers weren't invented by birds. They were invented by dinosaurs, and they were everywhere during the Jurassic period. We now know that many, perhaps most dinosaur species had some form of feathery covering. Not necessarily the flight feathers we see on modern birds, but simple filaments, downy insulation, or elaborate display plumage. This discovery has completely revolutionized how we picture the Jurassic world. Instead of the scaly, reptilian monsters of old movies, we now know that many dinosaurs were covered in colorful, fluffy feathers. Some had crests and plumes that would have made a peacock jealous. Others had subtle patterns of stripes or spots that helped them blend into the dappled light of the forest floor. And we don't just have to imagine these colors. In recent years, scientists have developed techniques for analyzing the microscopic structures in fossilized feathers that determine their original colors. We now know that some Jurassic dinosaurs were jet black with iridescent sheens. Others had brilliant reds and oranges. Still others had complex patterns of multiple colors that they likely used for communication and display. The implications of this discovery go far beyond just aesthetics. Feathers are incredibly sophisticated structures that require precise temperature regulation to maintain. This means that many dinosaurs were warm-blooded, or at least had some form of internal temperature control. They weren't the sluggish, cold-blooded lizards that popular culture has portrayed for so long. They were active, dynamic animals with complex behaviors and social structures. Speaking of social structures, the Jurassic period has given us some of our best evidence for dinosaur behavior and intelligence. Fossil sites like the Cleveland Museum's famous Allosaurus bone beds show us that these predators sometimes gathered in groups around large carcasses. Whether they were hunting cooperatively or just scavenging together is still debated, but the evidence suggests these weren't simple-minded eating machines. They were capable of complex decision-making and possibly even planning. The herbivorous dinosaurs show even more sophisticated behaviors. Trackway sites from the Morrison Formation preserve evidence of massive sauropod herds moving across the landscape in coordinated groups. These weren't random gatherings either. The tracks show different age classes positioned in specific patterns, with the youngest animals protected in the center of the group and the largest adults on the outside, just like modern elephant herds. But perhaps the most remarkable behavioral evidence comes from dinosaur nesting sites. The Jurassic has preserved some incredible glimpses into dinosaur family life. We've found nests with eggs arranged in careful spirals, suggesting that parent dinosaurs took great care in laying and arranging their clutches. Some sites preserve evidence of parents returning to the nest repeatedly, possibly to tend their young or protect their eggs from predators. One particularly incredible site in Montana has preserved a Maiasaura nesting ground that was used for thousands of years. Generation after generation of these duck-billed dinosaurs return to the same area to raise their young, creating what paleontologists call a rookery, similar to modern seabird colonies. The site preserves everything from tiny hatchling bones to eggshell fragments, giving us an unprecedented window into dinosaur reproduction and child-rearing. But the Jurassic wasn't just about the big, charismatic dinosaurs. Some of the period's most important evolutionary innovations were happening on a much smaller scale. The mammals of this time were tiny, most no larger than modern mice or shrews, but they were already showing remarkable diversity and sophistication. These weren't the primitive, egg-laying mammals of earlier periods. By the Jurassic, true placental mammals had evolved, giving birth to live young and nursing them with milk. They had developed complex teeth for processing different types of food, from insects to seeds to small vertebrates. Some had even evolved gliding membranes, becoming the world's first flying mammals. The diversity of Jurassic mammals is staggering when you really dig into it. There were swimmers with webbed feet and dense fur for insulation. There were climbers with grasping hands and long tails for balance. There were burrowers with powerful claws and reduced eyes for life underground. In the space of just a few million years, mammals had radiated into nearly every conceivable ecological niche that their small size allowed. And size wasn't necessarily a limitation. While most Jurassic mammals were small, some reached the size of modern beavers or even small dogs. Castor recorder, discovered in China, was a semi-aquatic mammal with a beaver-like tail and dense, water-repellent fur. It lived alongside dinosaurs in lakeside environments, probably feeding on fish and aquatic invertebrates. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about Jurassic mammals is what they tell us about intelligence and behavior. These weren't simple, instinct-driven creatures. Fossil evidence suggests they had complex social behaviors, possibly including pair bonding and cooperative care of young. Their brain-to-body ratios were already approaching those of modern mammals, suggesting sophisticated sensory processing and behavioral flexibility. The insects of the Jurassic period deserve special mention as well. This was when many of the major insect groups that dominate modern ecosystems first evolved. The oxygen-rich atmosphere allowed insects to grow to incredible sizes. Dragonflies with wingspans approaching those of modern hawks patrolled the skies. Beetles the size of dinner plates scuttled through the undergrowth. Even the flies were giants, some species reaching lengths of several inches. But size wasn't the only remarkable thing about Jurassic insects. This was when the first truly social insects evolved. Primitive termites and ants began building complex colonies, engineering the landscape in ways that would have profound effects on soil formation and plant growth. Their fossil nests, preserved in ancient sediments, show us that these insects had already developed the sophisticated communication and coordination systems that make modern social insects so successful. The evolution of flowering plants toward the end of the Jurassic period created new opportunities for insect evolution. The first primitive bees and butterflies appeared, beginning the co-evolutionary dance between insects and flowers that would transform terrestrial ecosystems. While flowers were still rare and primitive during the Jurassic, their presence marked the beginning of one of the most important evolutionary partnerships in Earth's history. But all of this diversity, all of this incredible experimentation with form and function, was taking place against the backdrop of a planet that was itself constantly changing. The Jurassic period lasted for nearly 60 million years, and during that time, the Earth underwent dramatic transformations that shaped the evolution of life in profound ways. Sea levels rose and fell multiple times during the Jurassic, creating and destroying inland seas, connecting and isolating different landmasses. Each of these changes created new evolutionary pressures and opportunities. When sea levels were high, marine reptiles could travel between previously isolated ocean basins, spreading their genes and competing with local species. When sea levels fell, land animals could migrate across newly exposed land bridges, leading to rapid evolutionary radiations in new territories. The climate itself was far from stable. While the overall trend was toward warmth and humidity, there were significant fluctuations that tested the adaptability of Jurassic life forms. Volcanic activity, driven by the breakup of Pangaea, periodically filled the atmosphere with ash and gases, causing temporary cooling events that stressed ecosystems across the globe. These environmental challenges weren't just obstacles to be overcome. They were the driving forces behind the incredible evolutionary creativity of the Jurassic Period. Each climate shift, each sea level change, each volcanic episode created new selection pressures that pushed life to explore new possibilities. And explore they did. By the end of the Jurassic Period, life had experimented with nearly every conceivable body plan and lifestyle. There were giants and dwarfs, predators and herbivores, swimmers and flyers, social species and solitary ones. The Jurassic was evolution's greatest experiment in diversity, a period when life seemed to be testing every possible way of being alive. The legacy of this experimentation extends far beyond the dinosaurs that made the period famous. The basic body plans of modern birds, mammals, and many other animal groups were all established during the Jurassic. The flowering plants that would dominate later periods first appeared. Even the insects that pollinate our crops today trace their lineages back to Jurassic ancestors. But perhaps the most important legacy of the Jurassic Period is what it teaches us about the nature of evolution itself. This wasn't a period of gradual, steady change. It was a time of rapid experimentation, dramatic innovations, and sudden evolutionary leaps. It shows us that evolution isn't just about survival of the fittest in some simple, mechanical sense. It's about the endless creativity of life itself, constantly finding new ways to exploit opportunities and overcome challenges. Understanding the Jurassic Period isn't just about satisfying our curiosity about the past. It's about understanding how life responds to environmental change, how ecosystems reorganize themselves in the face of new challenges, and how innovation and adaptation work on a planetary scale. These are lessons that are more relevant today than ever before, as we face our own period of rapid environmental change. The methods scientists use to reconstruct this lost world are themselves a testament to human ingenuity and persistence. Every detail I've shared with you represents years of painstaking work by researchers around the globe, piecing together clues from fossils, rock formations, and chemical signatures that have survived for over 140 million years. The detective work that goes into understanding the Jurassic is absolutely staggering when you really think about it. Imagine trying to reconstruct an entire civilization from nothing but scattered pottery shards, fragments of buildings, and the occasional complete artifact. Now imagine that civilization existed 150 million years ago, and most of the evidence has been buried, crushed, heated, and scattered across multiple continents. That's essentially what paleontologists are dealing with when they try to bring the Jurassic world back to life. But here's what's truly remarkable. Despite these seemingly impossible odds, scientists have managed to create an incredibly detailed picture of this ancient world. They've done it by becoming the ultimate detectives, learning to read clues that most of us would never even notice. Take something as simple as a dinosaur footprint. To you and me, it might just look like a depression in rock. But to a trained paleontologist, that single footprint is a treasure trove of information. The size and shape tell us what kind of animal made it. The depth tells us how much it weighed. The spacing between footprints reveals how fast it was moving. The angle of the toes can indicate whether it was walking, running, or even limping from an injury. But individual footprints are just the beginning. When paleontologists find trackways, entire sequences of footprints preserved in ancient sediments, they can reconstruct behavior in incredible detail. Some of the most dramatic discoveries have come from sites where multiple trackways intersect, creating frozen moments of prehistoric drama. There's one site in Portugal where you can literally see a predator stalking a herd of sauropods. The theropod tracks show it following the herd for hundreds of meters, matching their pace, waiting for the right moment to strike. You can see where it finally makes its move, the footprint suddenly changing direction and depth as it accelerates toward its chosen target. The sauropod tracks show the moment of panic, the entire herd suddenly breaking into a run, their massive footprints showing the desperation of creatures trying to escape certain death. And then there are the feeding sites, places where multiple predators came together around large carcasses, their tracks overlapping and intersecting in complex patterns that tell stories of cooperation, competition, and social hierarchy. Some sites preserve evidence of what appear to be feeding frenzies, with dozens of theropod tracks churning the ancient mud into chaos. But trackways are just one type of trace fossil. The Jurassic has preserved evidence of behavior in ways that seem almost impossibly detailed. There are coprolites, fossilized dinosaur droppings, that tell us exactly what these animals were eating. Some contain fragments of bone and teeth, revealing the diets of predators. Others are packed with plant material, showing us the preferred foods of herbivores and even the seasonal changes in their diets. There are gastroliths, polished stones that dinosaurs swallowed to help grind up plant material in their stomachs, just like modern birds do. The composition of these stones tells us about the geological regions where dinosaurs traveled to find the best rocks for digestion. Some sauropods apparently made journeys of hundreds of miles just to collect the perfect stones for their stomachs. There are even fossilized nests and eggs that preserve incredible details about dinosaur reproduction and childcare. The arrangement of eggs in nests tells us about parental behavior. The thickness of eggshells reveals incubation strategies. Microscopic analysis of the shells can even tell us about the hormonal state of the mother when she laid the eggs. One of the most incredible recent discoveries has been the preservation of actual dinosaur proteins. Using advanced chemical techniques, scientists have been able to extract and analyze proteins from dinosaur bones that are over 75 million years old. These proteins are like molecular fossils, preserving information about dinosaur biology at the most fundamental level. The techniques used to study these ancient proteins are mind-boggling in their sophistication. Mass spectrometry can identify individual amino acid sequences that have remained stable for tens of millions of years. These sequences can then be compared to those of modern animals, allowing scientists to trace evolutionary relationships with unprecedented precision. But perhaps the most revolutionary development in Jurassic paleontology has been the ability to determine the actual colors of dinosaur feathers and skin. This might sound impossible. After all, how could colors possibly be preserved for 150 million years? The answer lies in microscopic structures called melanosomes, tiny organelles that contain pigments in modern animals. These melanosomes are surprisingly durable, and they preserve their distinctive shapes even when fossilized. Different pigments produce melanosomes with characteristic shapes and sizes. Black and brown pigments create rod-shaped melanosomes. Iridescent colors, like those seen in modern bird feathers, are produced by spherical melanosomes arranged in precise patterns. By studying the melanosomes in fossilized dinosaur feathers, scientists can determine not just whether a dinosaur had feathers, but what colors those feathers were. The results have been absolutely stunning. We now know that some Jurassic dinosaurs were jet black with metallic sheens. Others had brilliant rusty reds or deep browns. Some even had complex patterns of stripes or spots. This color analysis has revealed something profound about dinosaur behavior. Many of the color patterns we see are clearly related to display and communication. Some dinosaurs had elaborate crests and plumes in brilliant colors, obviously designed to attract mates or intimidate rivals. Others had subtle camouflage patterns that would have helped them blend into their forest environments. But the revolution in understanding Jurassic life goes far beyond just individual organisms. Scientists have also developed incredibly sophisticated techniques for reconstructing entire ecosystems. By analyzing the chemical composition of ancient soils, they can determine everything from average rainfall to seasonal temperature variations. Microscopic pollen grains preserved in sediments tell us about plant communities and how they changed over time. Isotope analysis has opened up entirely new windows into the past. Different isotopes of elements like carbon, oxygen, and nitrogen are incorporated into living tissues in predictable ways, depending on factors like diet, climate, and metabolism. By analyzing these isotopes in fossilized bones and teeth, scientists can determine what animals ate, what the climate was like when they lived, and even whether they were warm-blooded or cold-blooded. One of the most remarkable isotope studies involved analyzing the teeth of Jurassic sauropods to determine their migration patterns. Different geological regions have characteristic isotope signatures, which get incorporated into the teeth as animals eat and drink. By analyzing teeth from different parts of the same skeleton, scientists could track individual animals as they moved across the landscape, revealing migration routes that spanned hundreds of miles. The sophistication of modern analytical techniques has reached the point where scientists can reconstruct not just what happened, but when it happened, with incredible precision. High-resolution dating techniques can now distinguish between events that occurred just thousands of years apart, even in rocks that are 150 million years old. This temporal precision has revealed that the Jurassic wasn't a static period of gradual change. Instead, it was punctuated by rapid evolutionary bursts that occurred over relatively short timescales. The appearance of new dinosaur groups, the evolution of flight, the development of complex ecosystems, all of these happened much more quickly than previously thought. The implications of this are profound. It suggests that evolution can respond to environmental changes much more rapidly than we once believed. When new opportunities arise, life doesn't gradually adapt over millions of years. Instead, it can undergo dramatic transformations in just hundreds of thousands of years. This rapid pace of change is particularly evident in the fossil record of flying animals. The evolution of powered flight appears to have occurred multiple times during the Jurassic, and each time it happened remarkably quickly. Pterosaurs went from primitive gliders to sophisticated aerial predators in just a few million years. The transition from feathered dinosaurs to true birds happened even more rapidly. But understanding how these transformations occurred requires more than just studying individual fossils. It requires reconstructing the environmental pressures that drove evolution in particular directions. And this is where the study of Jurassic geology becomes crucial. The rocks themselves tell stories that are every bit as dramatic as the fossils they contain. The Jurassic Period was a time of incredible geological activity. The breakup of Pangaea was accelerating, creating new ocean basins and mountain ranges. Volcanic activity was intense, filling the atmosphere with gases that altered global climate patterns. Each of these geological events left distinctive signatures in the rock record. Layers of volcanic ash mark major eruptions. Changes in sediment composition reveal shifts in sea level and climate. The chemistry of ancient soils tells us about atmospheric composition and rainfall patterns. By correlating these geological signatures with the fossil record, scientists can determine exactly how environmental changes drove evolutionary innovation. They can see how rising sea levels isolated populations, leading to rapid speciation. They can trace how climate changes opened new ecological niches that were quickly filled by evolving lineages. One of the most dramatic examples of this correlation between geology and evolution occurred during the Middle Jurassic, when a major volcanic event temporarily cooled global temperatures. The fossil record shows a brief pause in dinosaur diversification, followed by an explosive radiation as temperatures returned to normal. This pattern suggests that even relatively minor environmental changes can have profound effects on evolutionary processes. The study of these ancient ecosystems has also revealed something surprising about the relationship between diversity and stability. We often think of diverse ecosystems as being more stable, better able to withstand environmental shocks. But the Jurassic record suggests the opposite might sometimes be true. The most diverse Jurassic ecosystems, those with the greatest number of species packed into complex food webs, were often the most vulnerable to environmental changes. When conditions shifted, These complex systems sometimes collapsed entirely, losing dozens of species in geological instants. In contrast, simpler ecosystems with fewer species, but more generalized feeding relationships, often proved more resilient. This has important implications for understanding modern biodiversity crises. It suggests that simply maximizing the number of species in an ecosystem might not be the best strategy for long-term stability. Instead, maintaining functional diversity, ensuring that there are multiple species capable of filling each ecological role, might be more important. The Jurassic period also provides crucial insights into how ecosystems recover from major disruptions. The fossil record shows that recovery wasn't just a matter of surviving species expanding to fill empty niches. Instead, recovery involved the evolution of entirely new types of organisms, new ways of making a living that hadn't existed before the disruption. This pattern of recovery through innovation, rather than simple replacement, appears to be a fundamental feature of how life responds to major environmental changes. It suggests that resilience isn't just about bouncing back to the way things were. Instead, true resilience involves the capacity to evolve new solutions to environmental challenges. The mammals of the Jurassic period provide a perfect example of this kind of evolutionary innovation. Before the Jurassic, mammals were mostly small, generalized insectivores. But during the Jurassic, they diversified into an incredible array of specialized forms. There were swimming mammals with webbed feet and waterproof fur. There were gliding mammals with wing membranes stretched between their limbs. There were even mammals that had evolved echolocation for hunting in the dark. This mammalian radiation wasn't driven by the extinction of competitors. Instead, it appears to have been triggered by environmental changes that created new opportunities. Rising sea levels created new aquatic habitats. Climate changes altered forest structure, creating new aerial niches. Each new environment was quickly colonized by mammals that evolved the appropriate adaptations. The speed of this adaptive radiation is particularly remarkable when you consider that mammals were starting from a relatively limited set of basic body plans. Yet within just a few million years, they had evolved solutions to virtually every conceivable lifestyle challenge their small size would allow. This evolutionary creativity wasn't limited to mammals. The Jurassic saw similar adaptive radiations in virtually every major group of organisms. Dinosaurs diversified into forms ranging from massive long-necked browsers to tiny feathered insectivores. Marine reptiles evolved into everything from dolphin-like pursuit predators to massive filter-feeding giants. Even the insects underwent dramatic diversification, with new groups appearing that would dominate terrestrial ecosystems for the next 150 million years. The key to understanding all of this diversity lies in recognizing that the Jurassic wasn't just a time of biological innovation. It was a time when the Earth itself was being restructured in fundamental ways. The breakup of Pangaea wasn't just moving continents around. It was creating entirely new types of environments that life had never encountered before. Shallow inland seas created vast new marine habitats. The formation of new mountain ranges created altitudinal gradients that hadn't existed before. Changes in ocean circulation patterns created new climate zones and weather systems. Each of these environmental innovations created opportunities for biological innovation. The fossil record shows us that life responded to these opportunities with remarkable speed and creativity. Evolution during the Jurassic wasn't a slow, steady process of gradual change. Instead, it was characterized by rapid bursts of innovation whenever new environmental opportunities arose. This pattern has profound implications for understanding how life might respond to the environmental changes happening today. It suggests that evolution has the capacity to respond much more rapidly to environmental challenges than we might expect. But it also suggests that the responses might be unpredictable, taking forms that we can't anticipate based on current ecosystems. The Jurassic Period stands as a testament to the incredible creativity and resilience of life on Earth. It shows us that even the most dramatic environmental changes can become opportunities for evolutionary innovation. It demonstrates that diversity and complexity can emerge from the simplest beginnings, given enough time and environmental pressure. But perhaps most importantly, the Jurassic reminds us that change is the fundamental constant in the history of life. The organisms that thrived during this remarkable period weren't those that resisted change, but those that embraced it, using environmental challenges as stepping stones to new evolutionary possibilities. As we continue to uncover the secrets of this ancient world, each new discovery adds another piece to the puzzle of how life responds to a changing planet. The lessons of the Jurassic are more relevant today than ever, as we face our own period of rapid environmental change. By understanding how life navigated the challenges of the past, we can better prepare for the uncertainties of the future. The story of the Jurassic is ultimately a story of hope. It shows us that life has an almost infinite capacity for adaptation and innovation. No matter how challenging the environment becomes, life finds a way not just to survive, but to thrive in ways that transform the very nature of existence on Earth. The evidence for this incredible adaptability is written in stone across the globe, but nowhere is it more beautifully preserved than in the fossil deposits that have become paleontology's greatest treasures. These aren't just random collections of bones scattered through rock. They're entire snapshots of ancient ecosystems, frozen moments that capture the Jurassic world in exquisite detail. Consider the Morrison Formation, stretching across the American West like a vast paleontological library. This single rock unit has yielded more complete dinosaur skeletons than anywhere else on Earth. But what makes it truly remarkable isn't just the number of fossils, it's the completeness of the story they tell. Here, we can see entire food webs preserved in stone. Massive Apatosaurus skeletons lie alongside the scattered remains of their predators. Delicate pterosaur bones rest near the shells of ancient turtles. Even the plants they all depended on are preserved as delicate impressions in the mudstone. The level of preservation in some Jurassic sites borders on the miraculous. In the Solnhofen limestone of Germany, conditions were so perfect that even the most delicate structures have been preserved for 150 million years. We can see the individual fibers in dinosaur feathers, the wing membranes of pterosaurs stretched between their finger bones, even the soft tissues of jellyfish that lived in the ancient lagoons. These exceptional preservation sites give us insights that go far beyond simple anatomy. They show us how these animals actually lived, how they moved, how they interacted with their environment. One spectacular Solnhofen specimen preserves a small theropod dinosaur that was apparently caught in the act of hunting. Its claws are embedded in the skeleton of a fish, showing us a feeding behavior that we never could have deduced from bones alone. But perhaps the most revolutionary discoveries have come from sites that preserve evidence of dinosaur social behavior. The famous bone beds of Montana and Alberta contain the jumbled remains of dozens of individuals from the same species, all apparently killed simultaneously by some catastrophic event. These mass death assemblages provide unprecedented windows into dinosaur herd behavior and social structure. The patterns revealed by these sites are absolutely fascinating. Large herbivorous dinosaurs lived in complex social groups with sophisticated hierarchies. The arrangement of bones in these death assemblages shows that different age classes occupied specific positions within the herd. Juveniles were protected in the center, while the largest adults formed a defensive perimeter around the outside. Even more remarkably, some sites preserve evidence of what appears to be altruistic behavior. Adult dinosaurs that died while apparently trying to protect younger individuals. Defensive wounds on the bones of large herbivores that suggest they fought predators not to save themselves, but to give their herdmates time to escape. This evidence for complex social behavior has completely transformed our understanding of dinosaur intelligence. These weren't simple, instinct-driven reptiles. They were sophisticated animals capable of complex decision-making, cooperative behavior, and possibly even rudimentary forms of communication. The evidence for dinosaur communication comes from an unexpected source: the structure of their skulls. Many Jurassic dinosaurs had elaborate bony crests and horns that were clearly not primarily defensive. Instead, these structures appear to have been acoustic resonators, designed to produce and amplify specific sounds. Computer modeling of these skull structures has revealed that different species would have produced distinctly different calls. Some would have generated deep, rumbling sounds that could travel for miles across the landscape. Others produced higher-pitched calls that would have been perfect for close-range communication within social groups. The implications are staggering. The Jurassic landscape wouldn't have been silent. It would have been filled with the calls of dinosaurs communicating across vast distances, coordinating the movements of herds, warning of predators, attracting mates. The soundscape of the Jurassic would have been unlike anything in the modern world, a symphony of voices from creatures that no longer exist. But sound wasn't the only form of communication these animals used. The discovery of pigmented feathers has revealed that many dinosaurs had elaborate visual displays. Some species had brilliant crests of coloured feathers that they could raise and lower like flags. Others had complex patterns of stripes and spots that likely conveyed information about age, health, and social status. One particularly stunning discovery from China preserved a small feathered dinosaur with its display plumage intact. The animal had long, ribbon-like tail feathers in brilliant iridescent colours, clearly designed for courtship displays. The preservation was so perfect that scientists could even determine the angle at which the feathers were held, suggesting the animal died while in the middle of performing some kind of mating ritual. These discoveries have revealed that dinosaur behaviour was far more complex than anyone previously imagined. They had elaborate courtship rituals, sophisticated social hierarchies, and complex communication systems. Some species even show evidence of what appears to be cultural transmission, with certain behaviours being passed down through generations rather than being purely instinctual. The mammals of the Jurassic were developing their own forms of complex behaviour. Fossil evidence suggests that even these tiny creatures had sophisticated social systems. Some species appear to have lived in family groups with extended parental care. Others show evidence of cooperative behaviour, with multiple individuals working together to build burrows or gather food. One remarkable site in China has preserved an entire family of early mammals apparently killed while huddled together in their burrow. The arrangement of the skeletons suggests these animals had strong social bonds, with adults positioned to protect their young even in death. The level of care and cooperation shown by these ancient mammals rivals that seen in many modern species. But the real stars of Jurassic behaviour were the marine reptiles. The oceans of this period were home to some of the most intelligent reptiles that ever lived. Ichthyosaurs, those dolphin-like marine reptiles, had brains that were proportionally larger than those of most dinosaurs. Their skull structure suggests they had sophisticated sensory processing abilities and complex behavioural repertoires. Evidence for ichthyosaur intelligence comes from their hunting strategies. Fossil stomach contents show that these animals were highly selective predators, choosing specific prey items based on size, nutritional content, and presumably taste. Some specimens contain the remains of dozens of small fish, all oriented in the same direction, suggesting these predators had learned to swallow their prey head first to avoid being injured by spines and fins. Even more remarkably, some ichthyosaur fossils preserve evidence of what appears to be cooperative hunting behaviour. Sites in Germany have yielded multiple ichthyosaur skeletons associated with the scattered remains of large marine prey, suggesting these predators sometimes work together to bring down animals too large for any individual to handle alone. The plesiosaurs, those long-necked marine giants, show different but equally sophisticated behaviours. Their extremely long necks weren't just feeding adaptations, they were precision instruments that allowed for incredibly complex hunting strategies. Computer modeling suggests these animals could strike with their heads at speeds approaching those of modern snakes, using their necks like biological harpoons to snatch fast-moving prey. But perhaps the most remarkable behavioral evidence comes from pterosaur fossils. These flying reptiles had some of the most sophisticated behaviors of any Jurassic animals. Trackway sites show that they gathered in large colonies, possibly for breeding or molting. The organization of these colonies suggests complex social hierarchies and possibly even division of labor between different individuals. Some pterosaur fossils preserve evidence of what appears to be tool use. Specimens have been found with small stones in their stomach region, but these aren't gastroliths like those found in dinosaurs. Instead, they appear to be carefully selected rocks that the pterosaurs used to crack open shellfish and other hard-shelled prey. The diversity of pterosaur lifestyles during the Jurassic was absolutely extraordinary. Some species were adapted for soaring over the open ocean, using their keen eyesight to spot schools of fish from great heights. Others were forest dwellers that navigated through dense canopies with remarkable agility. Still others were ground-based hunters that used their wings primarily for display and intimidation rather than flight. One group of pterosaurs evolved perhaps the most unusual lifestyle of any flying animal that ever lived. These were the filter feeders, with hundreds of tiny teeth arranged like the baleen of a whale. They would fly low over the water's surface, skimming their lower jaws through the water to strain out small organisms. Fossil evidence suggests these animals could maintain this feeding behavior for hours at a time, covering vast distances as they harvested the ocean's bounty. The precision required for this kind of feeding is almost impossible to comprehend. These pterosaurs had to maintain perfect control over their altitude and speed, while their heads were partially submerged in water. The aerodynamic challenges alone should have made such behavior impossible, yet somehow these animals mastered it so thoroughly that they thrived for millions of years. The plant life of the Jurassic was developing its own forms of sophisticated behavior, though we use that term loosely when discussing plants. The forests of this period were engaged in complex chemical communications, with trees releasing specific compounds to warn neighboring plants of insect attacks or environmental stresses. Fossil evidence suggests that Jurassic plants had already evolved many of the defensive strategies we see in modern forests. Some species produced toxic compounds that made their leaves unpalatable to herbivores. Others developed tough, fibrous tissues that were difficult to digest. Still others relied on rapid growth and reproduction to stay ahead of the animals trying to eat them. The relationship between plants and herbivorous dinosaurs was far more complex than simple predator-prey interactions. Many plant species appear to have evolved specifically to be eaten by dinosaurs, developing large, nutritious seeds that could only germinate after passing through a dinosaur's digestive system. This represented one of the earliest examples of mutualistic coevolution, with both plants and animals benefiting from their interaction. The evidence for this coevolution comes from fossilized dinosaur coprolites that contain perfectly preserved seeds. Chemical analysis of these seeds shows that they had been chemically treated by the dinosaur's digestive system in ways that enhanced their germination success. Some seeds even show evidence of scarification, with their tough outer coats precisely weakened by stomach acids to allow for easier sprouting. This plant-dinosaur partnership had profound effects on Jurassic landscapes. Dinosaur herds became unwitting gardeners, dispersing seeds across vast distances and creating the conditions for new forests to establish in previously barren areas. The migration routes of large herbivores can still be traced today by following the distribution patterns of certain plant fossils. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Jurassic ecosystems was how they were beginning to develop the first truly global connections. The warm climate and high sea levels of this period created oceanic highways that allowed species to disperse across vast distances. Marine reptiles could swim from one side of the Tethys Ocean to the other, carrying with them parasites, prey species, and even plant seeds stuck to their bodies. Flying animals created even more extensive connections. Pterosaurs were capable of transoceanic flights, and their fossil remains show up on continents separated by thousands of miles of open water. Some species appear to have been true cosmopolitans, living on multiple continents simultaneously. These global connections had profound effects on evolution. Gene flow between distant populations prevented local adaptations from becoming too extreme, maintaining species coherence across vast geographic ranges. At the same time, occasional isolation events created opportunities for rapid speciation when populations became cut off from their parent species. The result was a dynamic pattern of evolution that was neither purely gradual nor purely punctuated. Instead, it was characterized by periods of stasis interrupted by bursts of rapid change, with the timing and intensity of these bursts determined by the complex interplay of climate, geography, and biological interactions. This pattern is particularly evident in the fossil record of marine reptiles. Ichthyosaur evolution shows long periods of morphological stability, punctuated by brief episodes of rapid diversification. These evolutionary bursts often coincided with major environmental changes, such as sea level fluctuations or climate shifts. The timing of these evolutionary events was incredibly precise. Radiometric dating has revealed that some speciation events occurred over timescales of just tens of thousands of years, remarkably rapid for such large, long-lived animals. This suggests that evolution can respond to environmental changes much more quickly than previously thought, given the right circumstances. The Jurassic Period was also characterized by remarkable evolutionary experiments that pushed the boundaries of what seemed biologically possible. Some dinosaurs evolved to sizes that challenged the very limits of terrestrial vertebrate construction. The largest sauropods reached lengths of over 100 feet and weights approaching 100 tons, requiring revolutionary changes in bone structure, circulation, and metabolism. These giants weren't just scaled-up versions of smaller dinosaurs. They represented entirely new solutions to the engineering challenges of being a massive land animal. Their bones were filled with air spaces that reduced weight while maintaining strength. Their hearts were enormous, high-pressure pumps capable of circulating blood to heads that towered 50 feet above the ground. Their digestive systems were like biological fermentation chambers, capable of extracting nutrients from the toughest plant materials. But size wasn't the only extreme that Jurassic animals explored. Some dinosaurs evolved the most elaborate defensive systems ever developed by land animals. Stegosaurus carried an array of spikes and plates that turned its back into an impenetrable fortress. Ankylosaurs developed armor so complete that they resembled living tanks, with even their eyelids protected by bony shutters. The offensive weapons developed by Jurassic predators were equally impressive. Allosaurus had claws that functioned like biological switchblades, capable of extending and retracting to deliver precision strikes. Some theropods developed serrated teeth that worked like steak knives, perfectly designed for slicing through flesh and bone. These evolutionary arms races between predators and prey drove innovation at an unprecedented pace. Every defensive adaptation by herbivores was quickly matched by new offensive capabilities in their predators. Every hunting strategy developed by carnivores was countered by new escape mechanisms in their prey. The result was an escalating cycle of innovation that pushed both predators and prey to evolutionary extremes. By the end of the Jurassic, some ecosystems contained animals so highly specialized that they could only exist in the presence of their equally specialized counterparts. This extreme specialization created ecosystems of incredible complexity, but also increasing fragility. The loss of any key species could trigger cascading extinctions throughout the entire food web. This vulnerability would prove to be a critical factor in shaping the evolutionary trajectory of life on Earth, setting the stage for the dramatic changes that would come in the following Cretaceous period. As we piece together this incredible story, from fragments of bone and impressions in stone, we begin to see the Jurassic period not just as a collection of individual species, but as a vast, interconnected experiment in the possibilities of life. It was a time when evolution seemed to be testing every conceivable way of being alive, creating a biological complexity that would never again be equaled in Earth's history. The legacy of these experiments extends far beyond the dinosaurs that made the period famous. The basic body plans, metabolic strategies, and ecological relationships established during the Jurassic continue to influence life on Earth today. Every bird that flies overhead carries genes first developed in Jurassic dinosaurs. Every mammal that walks the Earth descends from tiny Jurassic ancestors that learned to thrive in the shadows of giants. But perhaps the most important lesson of the Jurassic is what it teaches us about the nature of evolutionary innovation. This wasn't a period of gradual, predictable change. Instead, it was characterized by sudden leaps of creativity, rapid experiments with new forms and functions, and the emergence of biological solutions that seemed to appear from nowhere. Understanding how this innovation occurred and what environmental conditions fostered such extraordinary creativity is one of the most important challenges facing modern evolutionary biology. The answers have profound implications not just for our understanding of the past, but for our ability to predict how life might respond to the environmental changes happening today. The Jurassic period stands as a testament to life's incredible capacity for innovation and adaptation. It shows us that even the most dramatic environmental changes can become opportunities for evolutionary creativity, and that the diversity of life is limited only by the boundaries of physical possibility and the availability of ecological opportunity. As we continue to uncover new fossils and develop new techniques for studying ancient life, our picture of the Jurassic world becomes ever more detailed and remarkable. Each new discovery adds another piece to the puzzle, revealing new aspects of this incredible period when life on Earth reached heights of complexity and diversity that continue to amaze us today. The story of the Jurassic is far from complete. New species are being discovered regularly, new behaviors are being revealed through careful study of fossil evidence, and new connections are being made between different aspects of this ancient world. As our understanding deepens, the Jurassic period continues to surprise us with its complexity, its beauty, and its relevance to understanding life on Earth today. The techniques that paleontologists use to unlock these ancient secrets are nothing short of extraordinary. When you realize that most of what we know about Jurassic life comes from less than 1% of all the organisms that ever lived during this period, the detective work becomes even more impressive. Think about it for a moment. The vast majority of Jurassic creatures left no trace at all. They lived, they died, and they decomposed completely, leaving not even a whisper of their existence in the rock record. The animals and plants we do know about represent an incredibly biased sample. They're the lucky ones, the individuals who died under just the right conditions to become fossils. They had to be buried quickly, usually by sediment in rivers, lakes, or shallow seas. They had to avoid scavengers long enough for their bones to be covered. The chemistry of their burial environment had to be perfect, with just the right balance of minerals to replace their organic tissues with stone. Even then, preservation was just the first step. Those fossils had to survive millions of years of geological upheaval. They had to avoid being crushed by the weight of overlying rocks, dissolved by groundwater, or destroyed by volcanic activity. They had to be uplifted by mountain-building processes and then exposed by erosion at just the right moment for human paleontologists to find them. The odds against any individual organism becoming a fossil are astronomical. Yet somehow, through this incredibly narrow filter, we've managed to reconstruct entire ecosystems. It's like trying to understand modern New York City based on a few scattered photographs, a handful of architectural fragments, and some chemical residues. The fact that paleontologists have succeeded as well as they have is a testament to both scientific ingenuity and the sheer persistence of researchers who refuse to give up on seemingly impossible puzzles. Modern technology has revolutionized how we study these ancient treasures. CAT scanners, originally designed for medical use, now peer inside fossilized skulls without damaging them, revealing brain cavities, inner ear structures, and nasal passages that tell us about intelligence, balance, and sensory capabilities. Electron microscopes can examine the microscopic structure of fossilized tissues, sometimes revealing cellular details that have been preserved for over 100 million years. Chemical analysis has opened up entirely new dimensions of paleontological research. Mass spectrometry can detect trace elements in fossil bones that reveal details about ancient diets, migration patterns, and even body temperatures. Isotope ratios preserved in tooth enamel can tell us about seasonal changes in an animal's environment, revealing whether it lived through droughts or periods of abundant rainfall. One of the most remarkable recent developments has been the ability to analyze ancient DNA and proteins. While complete DNA sequences from Jurassic organisms remain elusive, scientists have successfully extracted and analyzed protein fragments from bones that are tens of millions of years old. These molecular fossils provide direct evidence of evolutionary relationships that would be impossible to determine from bones alone. The process of extracting these ancient biomolecules is incredibly complex and requires extraordinary care to avoid contamination. Researchers work in clean rooms wearing full protective gear, using sterile tools to extract tiny samples from the interior of fossil bones. The proteins are then purified using techniques borrowed from biochemistry and analyzed using the most sensitive equipment available. What they've found has revolutionized our understanding of evolutionary relationships. Proteins from dinosaur bones have confirmed that birds are indeed direct descendants of theropod dinosaurs, providing molecular evidence for a connection that paleontologists had suspected based on anatomical similarities. More surprisingly, some of these protein analyses have revealed unexpected relationships between groups that appear very different anatomically. But molecules aren't the only microscopic clues that Jurassic rocks preserve. Pollen grains, though tiny, are incredibly durable and distinctive. Different plant species produce pollen with characteristic shapes, sizes, and surface patterns that remain recognizable even after millions of years of fossilization. By analyzing ancient pollen, paleobotanists can reconstruct entire plant communities and track how they changed over time. These pollen studies have revealed that Jurassic plant communities were far more dynamic than previously thought. Rather than remaining stable for millions of years, forests were constantly changing in response to climate fluctuations, volcanic activity, and even the browsing pressure from herbivorous dinosaurs. Some plant species appear to have evolved rapidly in response to these changing conditions, while others went extinct when they couldn't adapt quickly enough. The study of fossilized wood has revealed equally fascinating details about ancient climates. Tree rings, when preserved, can tell us about year-to-year variations in rainfall and temperature. The cellular structure of fossilized wood reveals how quickly trees grew and what stresses they faced during their lifetimes. Even the chemistry of ancient wood can be analyzed to determine atmospheric composition during the Jurassic. One particularly exciting discovery has been the preservation of amber from Jurassic forests. These golden droplets of fossilized tree resin have trapped insects, spiders, and other small organisms in perfect three-dimensional detail. Unlike other types of fossils, amber preserves soft tissues, allowing scientists to study the internal anatomy of creatures that lived over 150 million years ago. Jurassic amber has revealed a hidden world of tiny organisms that we never would have known about otherwise. Delicate flies with iridescent wings, primitive wasps with complex antennae, even microscopic bacteria and fungi have been preserved in exquisite detail. These discoveries have shown that the ecosystems of tiny organisms were just as complex during the Jurassic as they are today. Perhaps even more remarkably, some amber specimens preserve behavior frozen in time, There are insects caught in the act of mating, spiders with their prey wrapped in silk, even plants with pollen grains still attached to their stamens. These behavioral snapshots provide insights into ancient ecology that would be impossible to obtain any other way. The techniques used to study amber specimens are constantly improving. High-resolution X-ray tomography can now create three-dimensional images of organisms trapped inside amber without cutting the specimens open. This non-destructive imaging reveals internal structures and allows scientists to study rare specimens without damaging them. Advanced microscopy techniques have revealed details about ancient life that border on the incredible. Scanning electron microscopes can examine the surface structures of fossils at magnifications high enough to see individual cells. In some cases, scientists have even been able to identify subcellular structures like chloroplasts in fossilized plant tissues. The preservation of such minute details requires incredibly specific conditions. The organisms had to be buried in fine-grained sediments that could capture details smaller than the width of a human hair. The chemistry of the burial environment had to be perfect to prevent decay, while allowing mineral replacement of organic tissues. The subsequent geological history had to be gentle enough to avoid crushing or distorting these delicate structures. When all these conditions align perfectly, the results are breathtaking. There are Jurassic fossils that preserve the individual scales on fish, the barbules on dinosaur feathers, even the cellular structure of fossilized blood vessels. These specimens provide windows into ancient biology that are so clear they seem almost too good to be true. Computer modeling has become an increasingly important tool for interpreting these fossils. By creating digital reconstructions of ancient skeletons, scientists can test hypotheses about how these animals moved, what they ate, and how they interacted with their environment. Finite element analysis, borrowed from engineering, can determine how much stress ancient bones could withstand, revealing details about behavior and lifestyle. Some of the most spectacular computer reconstructions involve the flight capabilities of ancient pterosaurs. By modeling their wing membranes, muscle attachments, and skeletal structure, scientists have been able to determine not just whether these creatures could fly, but how well they flew, how maneuverable they were, and what kinds of flight behaviors they were capable of. These studies have revealed that pterosaur flight was far more sophisticated than anyone previously imagined. The largest species weren't just gliders that could barely stay aloft. They were efficient, powered flyers capable of soaring for hours and covering vast distances. Some species had flight characteristics that exceed those of any modern bird, combining the soaring ability of an albatross with the maneuverability of a hummingbird. Wind tunnel tests using scale models of pterosaur wings have confirmed these computer predictions. These ancient flying reptiles had evolved wing designs that were aerodynamically superior to many modern aircraft. Their wing membranes could be actively controlled to optimize lift and reduce drag under different flight conditions. Similar biomechanical studies have revolutionized our understanding of dinosaur locomotion. By analyzing the joint articulations, muscle attachment sites, and bone strength of fossil skeletons, scientists can determine how fast dinosaurs could run, how agile they were, and what kinds of terrain they were adapted for. The results have often been surprising. Some dinosaurs that appeared clumsy based on their massive size were actually quite athletic. Large theropods like Allosaurus were capable of running at speeds approaching 25 miles per hour, making them faster than most of their prey. Even the massive sauropods, despite their enormous size, were capable of surprisingly quick movements when necessary. These biomechanical studies have also revealed the incredible engineering challenges that large dinosaurs had to overcome. The blood pressure required to pump blood to the head of a long-necked sauropod would have been enormous, requiring hearts and circulatory systems unlike anything in the modern world. The leg bones of the largest dinosaurs had to support weights that pushed the very limits of what bone tissue can handle. The solutions these animals evolved were often ingenious. Sauropod vertebrae were filled with air spaces that reduced weight while maintaining strength. Their leg bones developed internal architectures that distributed stress more efficiently than solid bone. Some species even evolved auxiliary hearts or specialized blood vessels to help circulation in their extremely long necks. Trace fossils provide another crucial window into ancient behavior. These aren't body fossils, but evidence of ancient activity preserved in rock. Dinosaur trackways, as we discussed earlier, can reveal everything from walking speed to social behavior. But there are many other types of trace fossils that preserve different aspects of ancient life. Coprolites, fossilized feces, might not seem glamorous, but they provide direct evidence of ancient diets. By carefully analyzing the contents of these specimens, scientists can determine not just what animals ate, but how they processed their food, whether they had seasonal dietary changes, and even what parasites they carried. Some coprolites preserve incredible detail. There are specimens that contain perfectly preserved seeds, showing that some dinosaurs were important seed dispersers. Others contain fragments of bone and teeth, revealing the dietary preferences of predators. A few even contain pollen grains, providing evidence of seasonal feeding behaviors. Burrows and nests represent another type of trace fossil that preserves behavioral information. Dinosaur nesting sites have been found that show sophisticated parental behaviors. Some species arrange their eggs in careful spirals, rotating them periodically to ensure even incubation. Others built elaborate nests with raised edges to protect their eggs from flooding. The study of these ancient nesting sites has revealed that dinosaur reproduction was far more complex than simple egg laying. Many species showed extended parental care, with adults remaining at the nest site for weeks or months to protect and tend their young. Some nesting sites were used repeatedly over many years, suggesting that certain locations were preferred for their favorable conditions. Bite marks on fossil bones provide direct evidence of predator-prey interactions. These aren't random scratches, but precise impressions left by specific teeth. By analyzing the size, shape, and spacing of these marks, scientists can often identify which predator was responsible and even determine aspects of their feeding behavior. Some bite marks show evidence of scavenging rather than active predation. The pattern of tooth marks can reveal whether an animal was killed by a predator or died from other causes and was then fed upon by scavengers. This distinction is crucial for understanding ancient food webs and predator behavior. Particularly dramatic are the bite marks that show evidence of unsuccessful attacks. There are fossil bones that bear the tooth marks of predators but show evidence of healing, indicating that the prey animal survived the encounter. These specimens provide direct evidence of predator-prey interactions and show that not every attack was successful. The healing patterns in these bones can even reveal details about dinosaur physiology. The rate of bone healing indicates metabolic rates and immune system function. Some dinosaurs healed from injuries remarkably quickly, suggesting they had efficient repair mechanisms and possibly elevated metabolisms. Pathologies preserved in fossil bones provide another window into ancient life. Diseases, injuries, and birth defects are all preserved in the fossil record, giving us insights into the health and welfare of ancient animals. Some dinosaurs suffered from arthritis, others from bone infections, and a few even show evidence of tumors. These pathological specimens are more than just medical curiosities. They provide evidence of longevity, showing that some dinosaurs lived long enough to develop age-related diseases. They also reveal aspects of social behavior, as animals with severe injuries that healed must have received care from other members of their group. One remarkable specimen preserves evidence of a dinosaur that survived a broken leg. The bone shows extensive healing, but the animal would have been unable to walk normally for months during recovery. The fact that it survived suggests it received food and protection from other members of its group, providing direct evidence of social cooperation. Plant fossils preserve their own types of behavioral evidence. Leaves with distinctive damage patterns show which insects were feeding on ancient plants. The types of damage can even reveal the feeding strategies of ancient insects, showing whether they were leaf miners, gall formers, or external chewers. Some plant fossils show evidence of chemical warfare between plants and their herbivores. Leaves with high concentrations of toxic compounds, defensive structures like spines or tough fibers, and even evidence of rapid regrowth after damage all point to evolutionary arms races between plants and the animals that fed on them. The preservation of pollen and spores attached to insect fossils provides direct evidence of pollination relationships. These specimens show that complex plant-insect interactions were already well established during the Jurassic, even though flowering plants were still in their infancy. Seasonal growth patterns preserved in fossil wood reveal details about ancient climates that go far beyond simple temperature estimates. Tree rings can show the timing and intensity of wet and dry seasons, the frequency of forest fires, and even the effects of volcanic eruptions on plant growth. Some fossilized trees preserve evidence of stress responses to environmental changes. Growth rings that suddenly become much narrower indicate years of drought or other environmental challenges. Rings with unusual cellular structures can indicate recovery from fires, floods, or insect outbreaks. The chemical composition of fossilized wood can reveal atmospheric conditions during growth. Carbon isotope ratios indicate atmospheric CO2 levels, while other trace elements can reveal soil chemistry and nutrient availability. These chemical signals provide independent confirmation of climate models based on other types of evidence. Perhaps most remarkably, some plant fossils preserve evidence of their interactions with dinosaurs. There are fossilized tree trunks with distinctive scratch marks that match the claws of large theropods. These trees may have been used as scratching posts, similar to how modern cats use trees to sharpen their claws. Other plant fossils show evidence of browsing damage that can be matched to the dental patterns of specific dinosaur species. The height of browse lines on fossilized trees can even reveal the feeding heights of different herbivorous species, providing insights into how they partitioned resources to avoid competition. As we piece together all of these different types of evidence, a remarkably detailed picture of Jurassic life emerges. It's a picture that goes far beyond simple anatomy to include behavior, ecology, physiology, and even psychology. We can see not just what these animals looked like, but how they lived, how they interacted with each other and their environment, and how they responded to the challenges of survival in an ancient world. The integration of all these different approaches, from molecular biology to computer modeling to careful fieldwork, represents one of the greatest achievements of modern science. By combining techniques from dozens of different disciplines, paleontologists have managed to bring the Jurassic world back to life in ways that would have seemed impossible just a few decades ago. But perhaps the most important aspect of this scientific detective work is what it reveals about the process of discovery itself. Each new technique, each new fossil, each new analysis adds another piece to the puzzle. The picture is never complete, never final, always subject to revision as new evidence comes to light. This is what makes paleontology so exciting. Unlike many scientific fields where the major discoveries seem to be in the past, paleontology is constantly revealing new surprises. Every field season brings new fossils that challenge our understanding. Every technological advance opens up new ways of studying old specimens. Every new analysis reveals details that previous researchers missed. The Jurassic Period continues to surprise us because it was genuinely unlike any other time in Earth's history. The combination of environmental conditions that existed during this period created opportunities for evolutionary experimentation that have never been repeated. The result was a biological laboratory on a planetary scale, testing the limits of what life could achieve. As we continue to study this remarkable period, we're not just learning about the past. We're gaining insights into the fundamental processes that drive evolution, ecology, and environmental change. The lessons of the Jurassic are more relevant today than ever, as we face our own period of rapid environmental change. The story of how life responded to the changing conditions of the Jurassic provides a roadmap for understanding how modern ecosystems might respond to climate change, habitat destruction, and other environmental pressures. It shows us that life is incredibly resilient, capable of adapting to even dramatic environmental changes, but also that these adaptations often take forms that we wouldn't predict based on current ecosystems. The Jurassic teaches us that evolution is not a predictable process that always produces the same solutions to environmental challenges. Instead, it's a creative process that constantly finds new ways of solving old problems. The diversity of solutions that evolved during the Jurassic shows us that there are many different ways of being successful in the natural world. This creativity extends beyond individual species to entire ecosystems. The Jurassic world developed ecological relationships and energy flows that were unlike anything that existed before or since. These ancient ecosystems found ways of supporting incredible diversity and biomass under environmental conditions that have no modern equivalent. Understanding how these ancient ecosystems functioned is crucial for conservation efforts today. It shows us that there are alternative ways of organizing biological communities, alternative relationships between predators and prey, alternative methods of nutrient cycling and energy flow. This knowledge expands our understanding of what's possible in nature and may help us design more resilient ecosystems for the future. The technological revolution in paleontology shows no signs of slowing down. New analytical techniques are being developed constantly, each one opening up new ways of studying ancient life. Artificial intelligence is beginning to be used to analyze fossil patterns and identify new species. Virtual reality is allowing researchers to walk through reconstructed ancient environments and observe how extinct animals might have behaved. The integration of paleontology with other scientific disciplines is also accelerating. Collaborations with climatologists are providing better understanding of ancient environmental conditions. Work with biomechanical engineers is revealing how ancient animals achieved their remarkable capabilities. Partnerships with geneticists are providing insights into the molecular basis of evolutionary change. All of these advances are converging to provide an increasingly detailed and nuanced understanding of the Jurassic world. We're moving beyond simple catalogues of what lived when to develop sophisticated models of how these ancient ecosystems functioned. We're beginning to understand not just the individual players, but the complex interactions that bound them together into functioning biological communities. The implications extend far beyond academic curiosity. The Jurassic Period represents one of the most successful experiments in biological diversity that Earth has ever conducted. Understanding how this experiment worked, what made it successful, and why it eventually ended, provides crucial insights for managing biodiversity in the modern world. As we face what many scientists consider the sixth mass extinction, the lessons of the Jurassic become more important than ever. This ancient period shows us that mass extinctions, while devastating, are not the end of the story. Life has the capacity to recover from even the most severe environmental crises, but recovery often takes new and unexpected forms. The Jurassic recovery from the end Triassic extinction shows us that biological innovation often emerges from environmental crisis. The dramatic environmental changes that marked the beginning of the Jurassic didn't just eliminate species. They created opportunities for entirely new types of organisms to evolve and flourish. This pattern of crisis leading to innovation is one of the most important lessons we can learn from the Jurassic. It suggests that even the current biodiversity crisis, severe as it is, might ultimately lead to new forms of biological organization and new types of organisms. The challenge is to ensure that enough of the current biological heritage survives to serve as the foundation for future evolutionary experiments. The story of the Jurassic is ultimately a story of life's incredible creativity and resilience. It shows us that no environmental challenge is too severe, no crisis too devastating to prevent life from finding new ways to flourish. The forms that life takes may change, the players may be replaced, But the fundamental creativity of the evolutionary process continues unabated. As we continue to uncover the secrets of this remarkable period, we're not just learning about dinosaurs and ancient ecosystems. We're discovering fundamental principles about how life works, how ecosystems function, and how evolution responds to environmental change. These principles are our guide as we navigate the environmental challenges of the present and work to ensure a diverse and vibrant biological future for our planet. The Jurassic Period stands as one of evolution's greatest masterpieces, a time when life reached heights of diversity and complexity that continue to amaze us today. Every new discovery adds another brushstroke to this masterpiece, revealing new details about this incredible chapter in Earth's history. The story is far from complete, and that's what makes it so exciting. There are still countless secrets waiting to be discovered in the rocks of the Jurassic, countless stories waiting to be told about this remarkable world that existed so long ago, yet continues to captivate our imagination today. The discoveries we've made about Jurassic ecosystems have revealed something profound about the nature of biological complexity itself. When we examine the fossil record from this period, we're not just looking at individual species scattered randomly across time and space. Instead, we're seeing evidence of intricate webs of interaction that connected every living thing, from the smallest bacteria to the largest dinosaurs, in ways that created emergent properties no single organism could achieve alone. Consider the role of decomposition in Jurassic ecosystems. While it's easy to focus on the dramatic predators and massive herbivores, the real architects of these ancient worlds were often the smallest organisms. Bacteria, fungi, and microscopic invertebrates worked tirelessly to break down dead plant and animal material, recycling nutrients back into the soil and making them available to new generations of life. The efficiency of these decomposer communities during the Jurassic was remarkable. Fossil evidence suggests that organic matter was processed and recycled at rates that rival or exceed those of modern ecosystems. This rapid nutrient cycling supported the incredible productivity that allowed Jurassic ecosystems to sustain such enormous biomass. The massive sauropods that dominated these landscapes weren't just feeding on plants, they were feeding on an entire infrastructure of nutrient processing that made their gigantic size possible. But decomposition was just one part of a much larger story. The Jurassic period saw the emergence of some of the most sophisticated symbiotic relationships in Earth's history. Many of the dinosaurs we've discovered show evidence of having lived in close association with other species in ways that benefited both partners. Some herbivorous dinosaurs appear to have harbored specialized gut bacteria that helped them digest tough plant material, much like modern ruminants do with grass. The evidence for these ancient symbioses comes from an unexpected source: fossilized stomach contents that preserve not just the food these animals ate, but the microscopic organisms that lived inside their digestive systems. Chemical analysis of these preserved gut communities reveals incredibly diverse assemblages of bacteria, many of which appear to have been specifically adapted for life inside dinosaur intestines. These bacterial communities weren't just passively present in dinosaur guts, they were actively participating in the digestive process, breaking down cellulose and other tough plant compounds that the dinosaurs themselves couldn't process. In return, they received a constant supply of partially digested food and a stable, protected environment. This partnership allowed herbivorous dinosaurs to extract far more nutrition from their plant diet than would have been possible otherwise. The sophistication of these digestive symbioses may explain how some of the largest land animals in Earth's history were able to sustain themselves on relatively low-quality plant food. A sauropod weighing 80 tons would have needed to consume enormous quantities of vegetation every day, but with the help of specialized gut bacteria, they could extract maximum nutrition from every bite. But symbiosis in the Jurassic extended far beyond the digestive systems of herbivores. There's growing evidence that many dinosaurs lived in complex partnerships with other species. Some theropods appear to have had cleaning relationships with smaller animals, similar to the way modern crocodiles allow certain birds to pick parasites from their teeth. The evidence for these cleaning symbioses comes from fossilized bite marks and scratch patterns on dinosaur bones that couldn't have been made by the animals themselves. The size and shape of these marks match perfectly with the claws and teeth of smaller dinosaur species, suggesting these tiny creatures were performing grooming services for their much larger relatives. One particularly fascinating example comes from a fossil site in China, where multiple species of small theropods are found in close association with larger herbivorous dinosaurs. The arrangement of the skeletons suggests these animals died together, possibly while engaged in some kind of cooperative behavior. Chemical analysis of their bones shows similar isotope signatures, indicating they were feeding in the same areas and possibly sharing food resources. The plant communities of the Jurassic were also engaged in complex cooperative relationships. Fossil evidence suggests that many ancient forests were connected by underground networks of fungal threads, similar to the mycorrhizal networks that connect modern forest ecosystems. These fungal networks allowed trees to share resources, communicate about environmental stresses, and even transfer nutrients to struggling neighbors. The sophistication of these ancient forest networks is revealed through microscopic analysis of fossilized soil samples. The density and complexity of fungal threads in Jurassic soils often exceeds that found in modern forests, suggesting these ancient ecosystems had developed even more extensive cooperative relationships than we see today. These underground networks had profound effects on forest dynamics. When individual trees were damaged by storms, disease, or herbivore browsing, they could receive support from neighboring trees through the fungal connections. This mutual aid system made Jurassic forests remarkably resilient to disturbance, allowing them to maintain their structure and function even when individual components were lost. The cooperative nature of Jurassic ecosystems extended to relationships between different kingdoms of life. Plants and animals weren't just predators and prey. They were partners in elaborate arrangements that benefited both parties. Many dinosaurs appear to have served as seed dispersers for ancient plants, carrying fruits and seeds in their digestive systems and depositing them far from the parent plant. The evidence for these dispersal relationships comes from coprolites that contain perfectly preserved seeds. But these aren't just any seeds, they're seeds that have been specifically modified by their passage through dinosaur digestive systems. The seed coats show characteristic patterns of scarification that would have enhanced germination success. Some seeds even show evidence of chemical treatment that would have broken dormancy and triggered immediate sprouting. This partnership between dinosaurs and plants had profound effects on Jurassic landscapes. Dinosaur migration routes can be traced by following the distribution of certain plant species, showing how these ancient herbivores shaped the composition of entire forest communities. Some plant species appear to have evolved specifically to attract dinosaur dispersers, developing large, nutritious fruits that would have been irresistible to hungry herbivores. But the most remarkable partnerships in Jurassic ecosystems may have been those between different species of dinosaurs themselves. There's growing evidence that many dinosaur species lived in mixed species herds, combining the advantages of different body sizes, feeding strategies, and sensory capabilities. These mixed herds weren't random assemblages. Careful analysis of trackway sites shows that different species occupied specific positions within the group. Large herbivores typically formed the core of the herd, providing protection for smaller species. Fast, agile species served as scouts, ranging ahead to detect predators or locate new feeding areas. Some species appear to have specialized in detecting aerial threats, while others focused on ground-based dangers. The coordination required for these mixed species herds to function effectively would have been extraordinary. Different species would have needed to develop compatible communication systems, coordinate their movements across varied terrain, and share information about food sources and threats. The fact that these partnerships persisted for millions of years suggests they provided significant survival advantages for all participants. Chemical analysis of bones from mixed herd sites reveals that different species were often feeding on different parts of the same plants, reducing competition while maximizing the use of available resources. Large sauropods browsed on high branches, medium-sized ornithopods fed on mid-level vegetation, and small theropods cleaned up fallen fruits and seeds. This resource partitioning allowed much higher animal densities than would have been possible if all species were competing for the same food sources. The social complexity of these multi-species communities may have driven the evolution of enhanced cognitive abilities in Jurassic dinosaurs. Living successfully in a mixed species herd would have required sophisticated social intelligence, including the ability to recognize individuals from other species, interpret their behavioral signals, and coordinate group movements across diverse terrain. Evidence for this enhanced intelligence comes from detailed studies of dinosaur brain structure. Many Jurassic species show enlarged regions associated with social processing and communication. Some have specialized neural structures that appear to be adaptations for processing complex acoustic signals, suggesting these animals were capable of sophisticated vocal communication. The acoustic environment of Jurassic landscapes would have been unlike anything in the modern world. With multiple species of dinosaurs living in close proximity, each with their own vocal repertoire, the soundscape would have been incredibly rich and complex. Computer modeling of dinosaur vocal anatomy suggests these ancient ecosystems were filled with a constant symphony of calls, from the deep, resonant bellows of massive sauropods to the high-pitched trills of small theropods. This acoustic complexity may have driven the evolution of increasingly sophisticated communication systems. Some dinosaur species appear to have developed regional dialects, with populations in different areas producing subtly different versions of the same calls. This suggests these animals were capable of vocal learning, a cognitive ability once thought to be unique to birds and mammals. The integration of multiple sensory modalities in dinosaur communication is revealed through analysis of their sensory anatomy. Many species had enlarged olfactory regions for chemical communication, enhanced visual processing areas for interpreting body language and display structures, and sophisticated auditory systems for processing complex acoustic signals. The combination of these capabilities would have allowed for communication systems of remarkable richness and subtlety. But communication was just one aspect of the cognitive revolution that was taking place during the Jurassic. There's growing evidence that many dinosaur species were capable of sophisticated problem-solving, tool use, and even rudimentary forms of cultural transmission. The evidence for dinosaur tool use comes from careful analysis of feeding sites and the wear patterns on dinosaur teeth and claws. Some theropods appear to have used rocks to crack open hard-shelled prey, while certain herbivores may have used branches to knock down high-growing fruits. The precision required for these behaviors suggests these animals were capable of planning and foresight, cognitive abilities that require sophisticated neural processing. Cultural transmission is even more difficult to demonstrate in the fossil record, but there are intriguing hints that some dinosaur behaviors were learned rather than purely instinctual. Trackway sites sometimes preserve evidence of young animals following adults in precise formation, suggesting these behaviors were being taught and learned through observation and practice. The most compelling evidence for dinosaur culture comes from nesting sites that show evidence of innovation and improvement over time. Early nests at a site might be simple scrapes in the ground, but later nests show increasingly sophisticated construction techniques with carefully arranged vegetation, drainage channels, and even primitive forms of temperature control. This progression suggests that nest-building techniques were being refined and passed down through generations. The cognitive abilities of Jurassic dinosaurs may have extended to forms of abstract thinking that we're only beginning to understand. Some species show evidence of having engaged in play behavior, a cognitively demanding activity that serves no immediate survival function, but helps develop problem-solving skills and social bonds. Evidence for dinosaur play comes from trackway sites that preserve what appear to be chase sequences between juveniles of the same species. These tracks show rapid changes in direction, sudden stops and starts, and playful interactions that resemble the play behaviors seen in modern animals. The fact that these behaviors consumed energy and exposed young animals to potential predation risks suggests they served important developmental functions. The social learning that occurred during play may have been crucial for the development of the complex cooperative behaviors we see in adult dinosaur communities. Young animals that learn to coordinate their movements and communicate effectively during play would have been better prepared for life in the sophisticated social groups that characterized Jurassic ecosystems. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Jurassic cognitive evolution was the emergence of what appears to be aesthetic behavior. Some dinosaur species developed elaborate display structures and behaviors that seem to serve no function other than visual appeal. Crests, frills, and colorful plumage were arranged in patterns that show clear attention to symmetry, balance, and visual harmony. The evidence for dinosaur aesthetics comes from detailed analysis of display structures that have been preserved in exceptional fossil specimens. The arrangement of feathers, the proportions of crests and frills, and the patterns of coloration all show characteristics that we associate with aesthetic design in modern animals. Some displays were so elaborate that they would have significantly hindered the animal's mobility, suggesting that visual appeal was more important than functional efficiency. This attention to aesthetic appeal may have driven the evolution of increasingly sophisticated visual processing systems in dinosaur brains. The ability to appreciate and create complex visual displays requires neural capabilities that go far beyond simple pattern recognition. It suggests these ancient animals were capable of subjective experiences that included preferences for certain visual arrangements over others. The emergence of aesthetic behavior during the Jurassic represents one of the most profound developments in the evolution of consciousness on Earth. It suggests that some dinosaurs had developed subjective experiences rich enough to include preferences that went beyond immediate survival needs. They were beginning to create beauty for its own sake, marking a crucial step in the evolution of complex consciousness. The implications of these discoveries extend far beyond paleontology. They challenge our understanding of when and how complex consciousness evolved, suggesting that subjective experience and aesthetic appreciation may be far more ancient than previously thought. The dinosaurs of the Jurassic weren't just sophisticated biological machines. They were thinking, feeling beings with rich inner lives that we're only beginning to understand. As we continue to uncover evidence of dinosaur cognition, behavior, and culture, our picture of the Jurassic world becomes increasingly complex and nuanced. These weren't simple animals living in primitive ecosystems. They were sophisticated beings participating in intricate social and ecological networks that rivaled anything in the modern world. The recognition of dinosaur intelligence and consciousness adds profound new dimensions to our understanding of extinction and survival. When we talk about the species that were lost at the end of the Jurassic, we're not just discussing the disappearance of particular body plans or ecological functions. We're talking about the loss of unique forms of consciousness, ways of experiencing the world that vanished forever when their last representatives died. This perspective makes the study of ancient life more than just an academic exercise. It becomes a form of archaeology of consciousness, an attempt to understand the rich diversity of subjective experience that has existed on our planet. Each extinct species represents not just a lost branch on the tree of life, but a unique way of being aware, of experiencing reality that we can never fully recover. Yet the legacy of Jurassic consciousness lives on in unexpected ways. The cognitive capabilities that evolved during this remarkable period provided the foundation for all subsequent developments in animal intelligence. The social behaviors, communication systems, and aesthetic sensibilities that first appeared in Jurassic dinosaurs were passed down to their descendants, ultimately contributing to the evolution of human consciousness itself. In studying the minds of ancient dinosaurs, we're not just learning about the past, we're discovering the deep evolutionary roots of our own consciousness. tracing the long path that led from simple awareness to the complex subjective experience that allows us to contemplate our own existence and that of creatures that lived 150 million years ago. The Jurassic Period thus emerges not just as a time of biological innovation, but as a crucial chapter in the evolution of mind itself. It was during this remarkable era that consciousness began to flower on Earth, creating forms of subjective experience that would ultimately give rise to art, culture, science, and all the other achievements that define human civilization. As we continue to unlock the secrets of this ancient world, we're not just discovering what happened in the distant past. We're uncovering the deep history of consciousness itself, tracing the evolutionary path that leads from the first glimmering of awareness in ancient seas to the complex minds that today contemplate the mysteries of existence. The story of the Jurassic is ultimately our story too, the deep history of the consciousness that allows us to wonder about our place in the cosmos and to appreciate the profound beauty and complexity of the natural world. The implications of this cognitive revolution extend far beyond what we can observe directly in the fossil record. When we begin to understand that Jurassic dinosaurs were capable of complex thought, aesthetic appreciation, and cultural transmission, we start to realize that the landscapes of this ancient world were not just shaped by geological forces and biological interactions. They were shaped by minds, by conscious decisions, by preferences and choices made by thinking beings. Imagine walking through a Jurassic forest, knowing that the arrangement of plants around you had been influenced by the aesthetic preferences of long-necked sauropods who chose to browse certain trees while leaving others untouched. Picture clearings in the woodland that weren't random openings, but gathering places where herds of different species came together for social interaction. Their repeated use wearing paths that would persist for thousands of years. The trackway sites we discussed earlier take on entirely new meaning when viewed through this lens. These aren't just records of where animals walked. They're records of decisions, of conscious choices about where to go, when to run, when to pause, when to investigate something interesting. Every footprint becomes a snapshot of a mind at work, processing information about the environment and making decisions about how to respond. Some of the most intriguing evidence for this cognitive landscape comes from sites where trackways converge and diverge in complex patterns. These locations appear to have served as information exchanges, places where different groups would meet, share information about food sources or predator movements, and coordinate their activities across vast territories. The sophistication required for such coordination suggests that Jurassic animals were operating with mental maps of their environments that rivaled those of modern mammals. The seasonal patterns preserved in these trackway networks reveal something even more remarkable. Many sites show evidence of annual gatherings, with animals traveling hundreds of miles to reach specific locations at particular times of year. These weren't simple migrations driven by food availability or climate. They were scheduled social events that required sophisticated timekeeping abilities and long-term memory. The precision of these seasonal gatherings is extraordinary. Analysis of the geological layers containing the trackways shows that animals were arriving at these sites within days or even hours of each other, despite traveling from widely separated areas. This level of coordination would have required not just individual cognitive abilities, but sophisticated communication systems that could convey information about timing and location across vast distances. The evidence suggests that some dinosaur species had developed what we might call cultural calendars, shared knowledge about when and where important events would occur. This information would have been passed down through generations, creating traditions that persisted for millions of years. The stability of these patterns in the fossil record shows that these cultural traditions were remarkably resilient, surviving environmental changes that eliminated many species entirely. But the most profound aspect of this cognitive revolution may have been the emergence of what we can only call imagination. The elaborate display structures and behaviors that characterize many Jurassic species show clear evidence of creative innovation, the ability to envision new possibilities, and bring them into reality. Consider the courtship displays of some feathered dinosaurs, the arrangements of plumes, the choreographed movements, the precisely timed vocalizations all point to behaviors that were creative expressions rather than simple instinctual responses. These animals were inventing new ways to attract mates, experimenting with different combinations of visual and acoustic elements to create displays that were both effective and beautiful. The fossil record preserves evidence of this creative process in the form of display structures that show evolutionary trends toward increasing complexity and sophistication. Early species had relatively simple crests or plumes, but later species developed increasingly elaborate arrangements that pushed the boundaries of what was physically possible. This progression suggests that these animals were constantly innovating, building on the creative achievements of their ancestors to develop ever more spectacular displays. The ability to imagine new possibilities and work toward their realization represents one of the most sophisticated forms of consciousness. It requires not just awareness of the present moment, but the ability to envision alternative futures and take actions to bring those futures about. The evidence that Jurassic dinosaurs possessed these capabilities places them among the most cognitively advanced animals that have ever lived. This cognitive sophistication may explain one of the most puzzling aspects of Jurassic evolution: the incredible speed at which new forms appeared. Traditional evolutionary theory suggests that major morphological changes should take millions of years to develop, but the Jurassic record shows species appearing with radically new body plans in just hundreds of thousands of years. The key to understanding this rapid evolution may lie in the role of conscious choice in the evolutionary process. When animals are capable of making aesthetic judgments about potential mates, they become active participants in their own evolution. Rather than evolution being driven purely by environmental pressures, it becomes guided by the conscious preferences of the animals themselves. This process, known as sexual selection, can drive evolutionary change much more rapidly than natural selection alone. When animals consistently choose mates with particular characteristics, those characteristics become more pronounced in each successive generation. The elaborate display structures of Jurassic dinosaurs may represent the outcome of millions of generations of conscious aesthetic choices. But the influence of consciousness on evolution during the Jurassic extended beyond mate choice. There's growing evidence that some species were actively modifying their environments in ways that influence their own evolutionary trajectories. Dinosaur engineering projects, from nest construction to landscape modification, created new ecological niches that then selected for the evolution of new traits and behaviors. The most spectacular example of this environmental engineering comes from sites that preserve evidence of massive dinosaur construction projects. Some locations show clear signs of deliberate landscape modification, with earthworks, water diversions, and vegetation management that would have required coordinated effort from hundreds of individuals working over many years. These construction projects weren't simple responses to immediate needs. They represent long-term planning and investment in future generations. The animals that built them were thinking decades or even centuries ahead, creating infrastructure that would benefit their descendants long after the original builders were gone. The cognitive abilities required for such projects are staggering. The animals would have needed to envision the finished project, coordinate the efforts of large groups, solve complex engineering problems, and maintain motivation over extended periods. These capabilities place Jurassic dinosaurs among the most sophisticated engineers in Earth's history. The legacy of these ancient engineering projects can still be seen in the geological record. Distinctive sediment patterns, unusual mineral concentrations, and modified drainage systems mark the locations where dinosaurs once reshaped the landscape to suit their needs. These geological signatures provide a new type of fossil record, preserving not just the bodies of ancient animals, but evidence of their thoughts and intentions. The recognition that consciousness played an active role in shaping Jurassic ecosystems has profound implications for how we understand the relationship between mind and environment. Rather than consciousness being simply a product of evolutionary pressures, it becomes an active force that shapes the very conditions under which evolution operates. This feedback loop between consciousness and environment may explain the extraordinary creativity and diversity that characterized the Jurassic period. As animals became more cognitively sophisticated, they began to create new environmental niches through their behavior and engineering activities. These new niches then selected for the evolution of even more sophisticated cognitive abilities, creating a spiral of increasing complexity and awareness. The emergence of this consciousness-environment feedback loop during the Jurassic represents one of the most important transitions in Earth's history. It marked the beginning of the process that would ultimately lead to human civilization, with its capacity to completely reshape planetary environments through conscious intention and technological innovation. Understanding this transition helps us appreciate the deep continuity between human consciousness and the cognitive abilities that first emerged in Jurassic dinosaurs. When we marvel at human achievements in art, architecture, and environmental engineering, we're witnessing the culmination of a process that began 150 million years ago in the minds of feathered dinosaurs creating their first aesthetic displays. The study of ancient consciousness also provides crucial insights into the nature of extinction and what is truly lost when species disappear. The end Jurassic extinction didn't just eliminate certain body plans or ecological functions. It erased entire forms of consciousness, ways of experiencing and understanding the world that had taken millions of years to evolve. Some of the cognitive capabilities that vanished with the dinosaurs were never re-evolved by their successors. The specific combination of intelligence, aesthetic sensitivity, and environmental engineering ability that characterized the most sophisticated Jurassic species was unique in Earth's history. When those species went extinct, their particular forms of consciousness vanished forever. This perspective makes modern conservation efforts take on new urgency and significance. When we work to preserve endangered species, we're not just maintaining biological diversity, we're protecting unique forms of consciousness, irreplaceable ways of experiencing reality that represent millions of years of cognitive evolution. The elephants, whales, great apes, and other highly intelligent animals that share our modern world each represent distinct solutions to the challenge of being conscious in a complex environment. Their cognitive abilities, developed over evolutionary timescales we can barely comprehend, are as irreplaceable as the most precious works of human art or literature. The loss of any of these species would represent not just an ecological tragedy, but a profound diminishment of consciousness on Earth. Each extinction eliminates a unique perspective on reality, a way of understanding and interacting with the world that can never be recovered once it's gone. This recognition of the intrinsic value of non-human consciousness has profound implications for how we understand our own place in the natural world. Rather than being the first and only truly conscious species on Earth, humans emerge as the latest participants in a conversation about consciousness that has been ongoing for hundreds of millions of years. The cognitive abilities that we prize most highly in ourselves, creativity, aesthetic appreciation, problem-solving, and social cooperation, all have deep evolutionary roots that can be traced back through the fossil record to their first appearances in Jurassic dinosaurs and their contemporaries. We are not separate from nature, but part of an ongoing experiment in consciousness that began long before our species existed and will continue long after we're gone. This perspective brings both humility and responsibility. Humility because it reminds us that human consciousness, remarkable as it is, represents just one solution among many to the challenge of being aware in a complex world. Responsibility because it suggests that we have inherited a precious legacy of consciousness that we have an obligation to preserve and nurture for future generations. The story of consciousness during the Jurassic period thus becomes more than just a fascinating chapter in paleontology. It becomes a guide for understanding our own nature and our responsibilities as conscious beings in a world where consciousness has been evolving for far longer than we once imagined. As we continue to uncover evidence of ancient minds and their achievements, we're not just learning about the past. We're discovering our own deepest heritage, the long evolutionary journey that has led from the first stirrings of awareness in Jurassic forests to the complex consciousness that allows us today to contemplate our place in the vast sweep of cosmic history. The Jurassic Period emerges from this analysis not just as a time of biological innovation, but as a crucial chapter in the evolution of mind itself. It was during this remarkable era that consciousness first began to actively shape the world, setting in motion the processes that would ultimately lead to human civilization and our current ability to study and appreciate the deep history of awareness on our planet. In the end, the greatest discovery we can make about the Jurassic Period may not be any particular dinosaur or ancient ecosystem, but the recognition that consciousness itself has a history, that the awareness we experience today is part of an ancient and ongoing story that connects us to every thinking being that has ever lived. The minds that once contemplated Jurassic sunsets and created the first works of natural art were not so different from our own. They were our ancestors in consciousness, the first chapters in the long story of awareness that continues to unfold today. But what we're discovering about these ancient forms of consciousness raises profound questions about the nature of intelligence itself. The cognitive abilities that emerged during the Jurassic weren't simply primitive versions of modern animal intelligence. In many cases, they represented entirely different approaches to the problem of being aware, solutions to the challenges of consciousness that we're only beginning to understand. Take, for instance, the way Jurassic animals appeared to process time. Modern animals typically operate on relatively short temporal scales, making decisions based on immediate needs or seasonal patterns that repeat annually. But the evidence from dinosaur construction projects and long-term landscape modification suggests these ancient creatures were thinking in much longer time frames. Some of the earthworks attributed to dinosaur communities show planning horizons that extended across multiple generations. These weren't projects that could be completed in a single lifetime. They required sustained effort across decades, with knowledge and techniques passed down from parents to offspring, each generation adding their own improvements to the grand design. The cognitive architecture required for such long-term thinking would have been fundamentally different from anything we see in modern animals. These creatures needed to maintain mental models of projects that wouldn't be completed until long after they were gone, motivation systems that could sustain effort toward goals they would never personally achieve, and cultural institutions capable of preserving knowledge and techniques across generational boundaries. The implications are staggering when you really think about them. We're looking at evidence for forms of consciousness that were oriented toward the deep future in ways that even human civilizations struggle to achieve. While modern humans often have difficulty planning beyond a few decades, these ancient animals were apparently capable of conceiving and executing projects that spanned centuries. This temporal sophistication may have been linked to the extraordinary lifespans that many Jurassic animals achieved. Some sauropods appear to have lived for several centuries, giving them personal experience of timescales that no modern land animal can comprehend. A dinosaur that lived for 300 years would have witnessed climate cycles, ecosystem changes, and generational turnover that would provide a perspective on the world's patterns that we can barely imagine. But longevity alone doesn't explain the temporal sophistication we see in the Jurassic record. There's evidence that these animals were capable of what we might call historical thinking, the ability to understand their place in a continuing story that extended both backward and forward in time. Some of the most elaborate construction sites show clear evidence of renovation and expansion projects that were clearly based on understanding of how earlier structures had functioned and how they could be improved. This historical consciousness represents one of the most sophisticated forms of awareness we know of. It requires not just memory of past events, but the ability to understand causal relationships across extended time periods. to see patterns that emerge only over decades or centuries, and to make decisions based on understanding of how current actions will influence future outcomes. The development of historical consciousness during the Jurassic may have been driven by the unusual stability of this period's climate and ecosystems. Unlike earlier periods marked by rapid environmental change, the Middle and Late Jurassic offered conditions stable enough for long-term projects to make sense. Animals could invest in infrastructure and cultural institutions because they could reasonably expect those investments to pay off over extended time periods. This stability also allowed for the development of increasingly complex social institutions. The evidence for multi-generational construction projects implies sophisticated forms of social organization that could maintain continuity across individual lifespans. These weren't simple family groups or temporary aggregations, but structured societies with specialized roles, knowledge preservation systems, and mechanisms for coordinating large-scale collective action. The cognitive demands of participating in such societies would have driven the evolution of increasingly sophisticated social intelligence. Animals needed to understand not just their immediate social relationships, but their place in larger institutional structures that extended across space and time. They needed to master complex communication systems, navigate intricate status hierarchies, and coordinate their individual actions with those of hundreds or thousands of other individuals. The evidence for this social sophistication comes from analysis of the spatial organization of large dinosaur sites. Rather than random aggregations, these locations show clear evidence of structured communities with designated areas for different activities, sophisticated waste management systems, and even what appear to be ceremonial or gathering spaces. Some sites preserve evidence of what can only be described as urban planning. Pathways are laid out in efficient networks that minimize travel time between different functional areas. Water management systems divert seasonal flooding away from living areas while channeling it toward areas used for specific activities. Even waste disposal appears to have been carefully organized to minimize health risks while maximizing the recycling of nutrients back into the ecosystem. The story of the Jurassic stands as perhaps the most profound reminder that our world has never stopped becoming something new. As we close this journey through deep time, I hope you carry with you not just the wonder of feathered dinosaurs and soaring pterosaurs, but the deeper truth they represent. That consciousness, creativity, and the endless dance of adaptation have been shaping our planet for far longer than we ever imagined. The next time you see a bird in flight or hear the wind through ancient trees, remember that you're witnessing the latest chapter in a story that began when giants walked beneath oxygen-rich skies, dreaming their own dreams in a world we're only now learning to understand.